So starting off with growth marketing. So this process of marketing is very much an art as much as it is a science, but it's it's very different for early stage companies versus more established organizations. And it's completely okay to do that, because the realities of both those businesses are very different. The budgets that you may have available, the established customer base that you may have available, but more importantly, the knowledge of the customers that you may have. So established businesses would have a lot more knowledge about their customers and their behaviors that has been acquired over time and is built into institutional memory. That institutional memory is often lacking for early stage startups. So it's a lot about learning on the go. So how exactly does it differ? The focus, as it's clear over here in this comparison, with more mature organizations, it's going to be about optimization, about tweaking something here, tweaking something there to make sure that you get to the right audience, you create a greater impact, and so on. So, for example, an established business like the Pepsis or the Unilevers of the world, or some of the more established digital players like the Facebooks or the Amazons of the world, would have a very clear idea of what a small tweak would entail. For example, if you drop your price by X%, this is the increased number of sales that you would acquire. Or if you change your if you reach out through a particular channel, for example, through Facebook ads, this is the kind of response rates that you would be getting. That is institutional memory built over time. Whereas in the startup or growth phase, you're very early and you don't have that knowledge. And so you're testing, you're learning, you're building that institutional memory. And that is what is the focus of what you want to do. But the critical element here is that you want to do it fast. You want to get up the curve very quickly. And so those are small experiments that you run quickly, and we'll be discussing that more today on how you can do that. What are some of the channels that you can use to get that done? The key metric, again, in the startup phase, more often than not, is growth, about getting more customers, about getting more users. Whereas for more mature organizations, it may be a bit of that, but it would also be about customer success, which is making sure that you deliver the right services, the right experience, the right interactions. The team obviously would, in a mature setup, you'll have large marketing departments, you'll have, specialized focus on specific subsegments of marketing, whereas in the startup or growth phase, you might have the same person doing a number of different tasks, a number of different priorities that they're managing, one of which might be marketing. And so you have to get into that agile and cross-functional collaboration mindset, which obviously is important to an extent in mature organizations as well, but far more critical at the growth stage. And in terms of the influence on the product itself, in this startup phase, it's very important to have the right kind of setup in place to see how customers are responding to a certain message and how you are tweaking your product in response to that messaging. So, for example, I've seen a particular startup in the agri-tech space based out of Nigeria, who had a cross collaboration between their UX specialists and their marketing team. And it worked very beautifully in the sense that every marketing initiative that was taken, every growth initiative that was taken, whether that was digital or more in person or through alternate traditional media channels, all of that was fed back into the UX team. And the idea was always to make sure that all customer interactions and the results were being tracked, and they were feeding into the product design, so that you could really understand how your marketing was kind of filtering back into the feedback from the customers was filtering back into the product design. So in terms of the relationship is again the learner relationship that I've been highlighting. Now, when you go into this marketing, you start setting up for your growth. There's a number of steps that you filter through, or an acquisition funnel or a marketing funnel that you filter your customers through. And at each step, you try to understand who you are reaching out to, what is working and what is not working. So, at the very early stage, you're creating awareness for your product, how people will find your product or your service. Some of those would get converted into your users, the ones that you acquire. Some of them would not. So you get into a smaller section of that funnel. You then move into the activation. You may have some kind of activation process within your onboarding, which we discussed in our last session. And so you move into an even smaller part of the funnel. Then once you have those users, it's also about retaining them and keeping that relationship going, getting them into repeat purchases. That's where retention starts to become essential. In the cases of some of the startups that we have, revenue does not come at the outset, and that's completely natural for a number of startup models. The revenue is built into the relationship much later, into the customer relationship. And so that's another step you have to look through. How many of those who were retained actually move into revenue generating customers. And then in an ideal setup, you want those customers to be advocates for your product and to start referring others to your services. And so that's a high level idea. I'm going to run through some of this because I see that our guest speaker has joined. So we'll come to this customer journey bit in a lot more detail in a while. But for now, for each step of that funnel and of that journey the customer goes through with you, there are a number of tools and techniques that you can use to optimize that experience, and we'll cover that after our guest speaker talk. The important part is that what you have to remember is that testing is not about guessing. It's about making sure that you have the basic information that you need before setting up your marketing plan. We've covered the user interviews, we've covered the discovery interviews earlier. We talked about how you divide your customers into personas, into segments, and how you plan your marketing around those personas is what is critical. And when you're planning that, it's important to know how you're going to track the progress of what you're spending money on, the marketing initiative that you're putting in place. And so having that relationship in place beforehand, that this is what I'm going to do, and this is how I'm going to track the success or failure of this particular marketing initiative or this growth initiative, that is very critical. And afterwards, in today's session, we'll cover metrics that matter and how you should be tracking those particulars. Generally speaking, the core message over here is that you can plan out your acquisition funnel, you can plan out your customer journey, but the journey that your customers take will vary from different customer segments to customer segments. In the case of B2B, in case of B2B space, it will vary from customer to customer. And it's really about making sure that you can understand what those common elements in the journey look like. And the core of it, as Subhanu was also talking about, is trial and testing and making sure that it's not just about randomized testing. It's also about making sure you have the right hypothesis, the right idea of what you want to test by at each stage. So in this, you'll see, throughout this journey, you'll see a number of different levers that you can pull on or trigger. But the important element as you put in place all of these is to understand what works best for you. Right, so I'll pick a few of them just to give you an idea. One agri-tech that I really like out of Nigeria, they're called Agromol, and they primarily work in the B2B space. And when you're in that space, it's as much about the customer meeting, the first customer interaction that you're having, and when you're pitching and selling your product, as it is about creating the right kind of messaging and the right kind of awareness and interest in your product, right? So one of the key levers that they use is blogs. And what they do is with each new engagement that they go into, without disclosing public, confidential material, they highlight how they've managed to serve this particular customer, their particular needs through an element of customization, and how they have the right team to be able to deliver that customization. Because in the space that they operate in, customization is very important, because large agri businesses that they work with, they have their own processes, their own internal dynamics. All of them cannot work with the same exact solution. So they built the thing they keep highlighting is that we have a product that is very customizable with very little development effort and developer time and coding to deliver what we want to deliver for you. And that is the key message that resonates, that if this person is coming to pitch to us, they're showing something to us, but even before that, the customer is aware that they're open to customization, they're open to adjusting to our processes, and they have the ability to do it very quickly. And that is a message that helps open a lot of doors for them. Right. A second thing that I'll pick on is this YouTube product demo. So in an ideal world, I'll actually throw this question out to you. I don't know if you guys have seen many product demos on YouTube, but is there a particular industry that really intrigues you in terms of how well they've managed to perfect these product demos? Something that stands out for you? Okay, if none, I'll break the surprise. But for me, it's the handset manufacturing industry, the device manufacturers, right? They, in a lot of instances, they've now set up this space where they don't even have to do this themselves. You will see hundreds of YouTube videos in every market, in every language, where people will make these unboxing videos for all the new handsets that come out. And they'll basically walk you through the entire thing. And these are social media influencers. These are people with large followings. They don't get paid in a lot of instances. In some cases, they do get paid by the device manufacturers, but in a lot of cases, they don't even get paid. It's zero cost marketing, because the ecosystem that's been set up is very conducive for the device manufacturers, and they support the influencers in many ways in doing these demos. So they've set up the right industry connections. They get it done at very low to zero cost, and as soon as a new device is out, you get to hear all about its specs, all about its features, all about its standout options, and so on, right? A third and final thing that I'll mention here is payment options, right? I know a couple of our cohort members are also in the e-commerce space, and a few years ago, when digital payments were not very common in Pakistan, and even though options existed, but a very small proportion of Pakistanis had access to digital payments or the ability to make digital payments, a lot of this work was done cash on delivery. Even today, it's done cash on delivery in a large setting, right? The difference essentially that they saw was that even though card payments cost the e-commerce provider more, they have to pay up to 2.5% to 3% to card providers, to the Visas and the MasterCards of the world and the associated banks in service charges. But what they started to realize was that cash on delivery, they were getting up to 70% returns because the customer was not committed. And when the product was being delivered, either the customer would not receive it, they would not be there, they would say, yeah, I changed my mind. There's no implication for the customer, there's no tie-in. Whereas with digital payments, the payment has already been made. And even though there is a return policy in place, it's one more, step. It's a hassle in many cases. So people making digital payments were far more likely, that's 70%. I don't have the current number, but a few years ago, that number had reduced to about 20%. So all of a sudden, you've cut your return rates by a third. And you've cut the logistics costs associated with that as well, because if your product gets returned, you've paid twice for shipping and you've made no money off of it, right? So they started to promote digital payments like crazy. Even now, you'll see the Daraz and the other players in the space offering some very steep discounts if you use digital payment options. And the reason for that is the retention, is the confirmed delivery, is the knowledge that this sale has been made. So we've covered this. You would have heard this in 100 different iterations. Your success is your customer's success. But the important area, the important thing to build off of that, or the important points to build off of it, is the one, the customer needs will keep changing, but there will be a level of consistency that you can play off of. So if you know your customer's success in one area, it will help you amplify and build on another. What Subhan was also talking about, that once you know that an experiment has succeeded, a particular growth loop has been created, you ship that out, you start working on the next one, but the next one that you're working on, you work with the knowledge you've acquired in building that first one, and you try to build that into it. That's where the amplification happens. And the second element, which I think is very important, is really about balance, because I think Habib was mentioning this point earlier, that leading questions to customers, they'll say what you want to hear. And this is something we were talking about in Level Up 1 as well, that if you keep asking the same thing over and over, people will say yes, that's how it works. So you're not looking to reinforce your previously held beliefs, but at the same time, you take the lead in certain areas, as long as you have clearly identified ways of checking if you are able to achieve success in that. And that is to say, it's not just about talking to customers, and if you have 1 million customers, you can't talk to each of them. It's also about having the data analytics prowess within your organization to be able to see what the trends are saying, and to be able to see what is working and what is not working based on the usage data, for example, that you may have for yourself.